Hi, do you work here?
Sure do.
Yeah, I got a question about seating depth on these bullets. How deep into the case should I set these?
Standard SAMI seating depth has won 11 world wars.
What the fuck?
Old Man Taylor, welcome back to the reloading bench. Today's topic, all about seating depth. Seating depth is controversial. So what are we gonna do? I'm gonna attempt to tune two different loads utilizing seating depth. I'm gonna take you through the process to figure out what is the best seating depth, if it's real. Then we're gonna shoot large sample sizes of the best and the worst of each of those tunes. And then we're gonna analyze those results using statistics to determine whether or not seating depth really even matters. This video is a standalone video on seating depth, but it is also part of the 223 long-range precision loading series I've been doing. And if you've been following along with that, you already know our two loads are gonna be one with N135 and N140. We've narrowed that down to two specific loads, and now we're gonna see what happens if we tune them. So I'm gonna start out with N135. Let's take a look at what got us here, and I'll put that data up behind me as we go here. But we shot a 15-shot, quote, confirmation group, and we had some pretty good results. These loads are 77 SMKs. Those were provided by Sierra. The brass is Lapua, that was provided by Lapua, and the gunpowder's N135, and I've shot up everything they've given me, so this is my own. We're running 21.7 grains of N135 in this load. Legal disclaimer, do not use my load. Work up your own load based on printed publication and be sure to work safely towards your max load. So one thing about our 15-shot group that's up behind me here, we had some wind during that session, and if we look at the entire group, it was a little bigger than what we expected or what we would normally move forward with. But because of that wind, if we look at the horizontal, we can see that's the significance of the group. The vertical, we did not have a tremendous amount of climb, and we knew there was wind. So we gave this one a pass with only 0.61 in the vertical. So through this process, we want to verify that that was the case, that wind was our issue there, and we didn't just get, quote, lucky in the vertical with 15 shots. Our velocity, we were running fast enough. We wanted to be over 27.5. We were at 27.63 on those 15 shots. With a standard deviation, we wanted to be under 12. We had a 7. What is going to be the process for the next steps? The next steps for N135 are I'm going to load up 16 groups of 3 shots each. They're all going to be prepared exactly the same, all at the same time in one batch. I think that's important to call out. Don't load 3 shots and then 3 shots and then 3 shots. Prep your brass exactly the same. Load all the cartridges with powder all the same so you're ready for the projectile. The only thing that's going to be different will be the actual seating depth of the projectile. How did I determine where to start? I figured out what the jam was on my rifle, and there's lots of different ways to do that with this particular projectile, and I backed off 2/1000ths of an inch. That just happens to actually fit my very large magazine for 223. If you have a standard mag, that'll be too long. You'll have to single feed. If you have a requirement that they fit in the magazine, then just start at your max magazine length. That really won't make any difference. What we're looking for should repeat several times through different depths, and therefore we can really start just about anywhere we want as long as we have enough room. I kind of consider the length printed by SAMI to be our minimum. I try not to go any shorter than that, but longer we have no problem. It's also important that we stay off the lands. We've got to come back from the lands, and the reason for that is if we make contact with the lands, we could experience some pressure spikes, but realistically, we're going to just see a different behavior, different velocity if it's sitting perfectly against the lands. If we try to replicate that, it's very difficult to get that seating depth so precise that it engages the lands exactly the same as the barrel wears, and even just through normal process. It's just difficult to do. So we like to stay away from the lands, and we like to stay longer than Sammy's printed data. There it is. I'm going to start with my longest load that is 20 thousandths off the jam, and I'm going to work back 3 thousandths of an inch for every 3-shot group. So I'll have a ladder of, I'm going to shoot 50 shots. It'll be 48. I'll have a couple siders in there. So I'll shoot 16 groups of 3 shots each. That's what I've got loaded up. That's what we're taking to the range. So I'll see you at the range. All right, so I've got all of my rounds loaded up in block 3 with 3 alternating colors, and I'm going to shoot my longest rounds first, and I'll work through these with my shortest group at 2045 last. Going into the top left meat box. Three onto yellow. Top right hand meat box, group 3. Holding for win. Four. Left. Middle of the middle. Group 6. Group 6 looked pretty good. All right, on to group 7.
I thought it would put it on the right edge. Yeah.
Looks like I got 2 in there. Almost all 3. All right, group 7 looked pretty good. 6 isn't bad. Let's see if we can hold that through group 8. First, looking fantastic. There it is. 9 look fantastic. That one had an impact a little farther right than we've had most of today.
Killing me, Small.
But it is grouping. Slightly different place.
Yeah, that's Sac where we were. So we kind of starting to open, and it did. Group 9 started to open back up as we anticipated it, if that was They're between 7, 8, 7 and 8.
All right, group 10.
Hot, 2 minutes remaining hot.
Okay, I just put that shot on target, so the bottom target, I'll use the footage and really move that.
Group 12. Group 13. Group 14. Should be group 15.
That was the widest shot to the lower right today by a lot.
Back from the range. I got targets. I got data. You knew that I would. I gotta tell you, shooting these 3-shot groups is fun. Why? Because, well, even statistically, if they're all the same, I end up with some 3 shots in one hole just by statistics. That's fun. I enjoy that. Is it meaningful? Probably not, but I do like it. So how did these groups look? How did we come out? Well, we ended up, probably our worst group was .858. While our best was .133. Yeah, that was pretty incredible. But that doesn't really matter. That's got nothing to do with seating depth. So what are we gonna do with this data? Well, I found the size of these groups in the computer, each one of them, each 16, and I've plotted those on a graph. Yep, put that up right behind me. And that graph is gonna show us how they stacked up in order. And what we're looking at here is the longest over here, and then that graph is getting shorter and shorter as we move to this side. What I'm looking for here is a pattern. I want to see my larger groups get small, and then a consecutive group. There have to be 2 that line up and also be small right next to it, and then another group could be small, but probably starting to go back up. That's the pattern that we're actually trying to identify here. And it's one of the reasons we chose .003. Some of these nodes, so to speak, if you want to call it that, can be pretty small. They can be .06, .07, .08. So if I went to, say, .005 steps in between, I may only get one group, and it's a 3-shot group. So I just don't know, is that statistically just random distribution, or is that a pattern that's starting to develop? If I go smaller than that, I cover less range. If I want to shoot 100 rounds, could I do this with .2s? Yeah, absolutely could. Then would I be looking for 3 consecutive to line up? Yep, that's exactly what I would do. Would it be more accurate? Probably. Would it cost me 100 rounds? It cost me twice as many bullets. So that's the pattern we're looking for. And if we look at this graph, we can see we get a pattern at 3 and 4. That's precisely what we're looking for. 3 being the longest of the 2. That tells me my seating depth node is somewhere in that 3 to 4 range. A little bit on one side, a little on the other. Maybe 7 or 8 thousandths of an inch is about the range that I should get similar performance here if this works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to load to the longest side of that and come back towards the shorter one about 1 thousandths. That's going to give me lots of room for seating depth variance in my loading process, for a little bit of throat wear, stuff like that. So in this case, that's going to be, according to my bullet comparator, do your own, don't use my number, comparators do vary. Mine is 0.2083. That's going to be the load that we're going to take forward and compare to our worst load. What is our worst load? Well, if we look at 14 and 15, we can see the same pattern happening on the opposite side, on the large group side. That's what we're looking for. That's our pattern for the worst. So I'm going to take those, that's 2045, and we're going to compare that to this load. Now let's talk about velocity for a second. People ask, if I change my seating depth, aren't I changing velocity? And if so, have I changed the results of my load development? For those of you who have followed the 223 loading series, you know the first thing we did was pick a powder that was not sensitive to point of impact based on changes in velocity, temperature, seating depth. So in our scenario, for what we're doing today, it's going to have no effect, no big deal. You may be in a different situation if you've chosen a powder that is very sensitive to changes in velocity, which I don't recommend. How much? How much of a swing are we looking at here? Max 25 feet per second. That's what we're going to see from one extreme all the way to the other. If we look at this velocity graph, we can see it's not real clear. It's not perfect linear. It's only 3 shots. So, the velocity was kind of dancing around like you'd expect on a 3-shot group. It'll even out with more shots, but we didn't need to spend more just for this purpose. But if we look at the trend of this graph, we can see the velocity is definitely increasing as we're shrinking the size of that cartridge. So that's the effect that we were talking about. So we've got that burning question, is this even real? Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to load up 25 shots of our best, 25 shots of our worst. We're taking them in the range. We're going to put them head to head. I'll see you at the...
Here's what it's going to look like. I've got 3 targets up there. I'm going to turn them sideways. Top one's going to be deciders to warm up the barrel. You clear the fouling. Second one underneath that is going to be our longest seating depth. This is the one our seating depth test showed should be the optimum seating depth. And then the third target underneath there is what our seating depth test shows should be the worst. What I'm going to do is shoot 25 shots of each. And I'm going to do that round robin. I'm going to shoot 5-shot groups, 5-shot groups per target. I'm going to shoot group 1 of the longer, and then I'm going to shoot 1 of the shorter. Then I'm going to come back up and shoot 2 of the longer, 2 of the shorter, etc. throughout the day. I do expect a little bit of wind gusting going on today. It's fairly calm this morning, but I do expect some gusts as we move through the day. I'll try to make sure the flag is laying when I break the shot. But the idea behind the round robin is if we start picking up a little bit of wind, it should affect both groups the same. So, as the conditions change throughout the day, the composite 25-shot group will be larger, but we're really comparing the two, not how small that actually is. If that was the case, I'd try to get them all in with the same weather conditions. Today, I'm really testing the 2 ideas to see, is there a difference? The way this is going to work, I've got 5-shot strings covered in tape. I've got yellow for our longer. I've got blue for our shorter. And I'll just pull 5 for the first group, 5 for the second.
Shooting the longs, group 1, into the top left of the middle target.
I can put 2 in the same hole. Third shot. Yeah. Taking you out for the most up here. The top is the fusion. The bottom is shot. Now, when you're using the sled, are you letting the sled do the work, or are you just adjusting to your point of impact?
First string of our shorts going into the top left of the bottom target.
So like, you notice the price difference is always good. It's
Okay, second string of our longest, and this will be going into the top right target.
2 minutes remaining hot. 2 minutes remaining hot.
This is going to be the second string of our shorter cartridges. This will be going into the top right of the bottom target. Wind today is right to left. Third string of our longest, and this will be going into the center target of the center target. Okay, string number 3 of our short. This will be going into the middle of the bottom page. I'm seeing at this point, these rounds are loaded exactly the same with the exception of the seating depth, but I definitely have more of a right shift on our longer cartridges and I have a left shift on our shorter. I am being particularly particular about breaking that shot with a laying flag, so I don't believe that is wind today. String number 4 of our longest shots, and these will be going into the bottom left of the middle target.
129. I see those 2 orange. Well, with that, I thought it was separate. We gotta wait until the target's up. Now he's like, oh my god.
String 4 for our shorts, going to the bottom left of the bottom target.
But I think I hit the last 10.
Waiting on wind.
Yeah. So I do like this then?
This is the 5th string of our longs, and this is going into the bottom right hand side of the middle target. We got the 5th string of our shorts, and this will be in the bottom right hand corner of the bottom target. That's a wrap. Back from the range, yeah, okay. Just a quick reminder here, 2083 was our longest, and our longest was our, quote, tuned load. The 2045 was our shorter, and that was supposed to be our worst load. Well, when we looked at those 5-shot groups as they were happening, kind of hard to tell, wasn't it? They looked pretty similar. So you got to stick that in the computer. When I do that, what do I see? Our worst group for our longest, 0.672. Our best for our longest, 0.277. Not too shabby for a 5-shot group. But keep in mind, all of these 5-shot groups for the longest were the same exact load. So this is just yet another example why 5-shot groups aren't good enough. If we compile them all, we're going to get a bigger target. We'll do that in just a second. Let's talk about our shortest, 0.733 and 0.297. So once again, not shabby at all on either of them. Well, let's go ahead and get those composites together. I'll put the large composite up first. Remember, this is our, quote, tuned load. What do I got? 0.712. And we needed to be under 3/4, 0.75. We got it. How about the mean radius? How clustered were these guys? 0.192, sub 2 mean radius out of a factory action and a factory barrel. I like it. How about the composite for the shorts? Now these should have been our worst. Expect to see those numbers start going up. My group size, 0.921. It did in fact go up. Not a huge amount, but it did go up some. How about that mean radius? 0.246. That's also kind of substantial. Not ridiculously bad, certainly, but not fantastic either. The gap between these two is actually pretty small. How small? Well, statistically, if we look at this and we run this out, what we want to see is a 95% confidence level to say they are definitely different groups. I didn't get 95. What I got was 83%. In order to see 95, I would have had this same result with 104 shots of each group. 208 rounds is what it would have taken, and that's if it didn't grow at all. What does that tell me? Well, that tells me it's not 100% definitive on its own. It tells me that I've got a 17% chance that if I shot 1,000 shot groups, they would end up being identical. The velocity on this, that was our other thing we needed to see, right? We needed to see our SDs, these 25-shot groups, be under 12 to move this load forward. My long, the quote tuned load, we got 8.9 on the SD. We passed. The shorts, the bad ones, 10.7. Still pretty dang good. We're below that 12. I'm happy. For 223, it's pretty difficult to achieve sub 12 SDs. I'm happy our final load has ended up where it has. What's the punchline? I'm approving this load. We have a 600-yard load ready to be tested at 600 yards. Before we move on, I do want to take a minute and thank, I did it in prod, for the super thanks. I appreciate that. Quick reminder for everybody, I am battling a little bit of the demonetization bit, not with the channel, but with individual videos. Some of those appeals I have won, some I have not. When YouTube demonetizes a video, whether I win that appeal or not, they tank who gets to see my thumbnail. So I do appreciate super thanks and supporting this channel, dropping those comments, forwarding, sharing this video, stuff like that. The algo does see that as engagement and helps offset some of this nonsense going on with hand loading. And I do appreciate your support. All right, but we've got 2 loads to prove. So the second one is N140, and here's just a really fast recap on why we're testing this load. I'll put its stats up. Our 15-shot confirmation gave us a 0.656 MOA on that group when we wanted it under 3/4. So that's why it's moving forward. Its mean radius was 1.78. Pretty incredible, but it was only 15 shots. That standard deviation of velocity was 9.8. It was a little getting up there just a touch, but well within our requirement if that holds. So we want to test that at 25 shots and see does it hold. I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the seating depth test that we just ran on the N135. I'm going to load up 48 cartridges. I'll have 50, so I'll have a couple ciders. I'm going to take 16 groups of 3 shots each. I'm going to start with my longest 2.090 on my comparator, and I'm going to work back in 0.03 of an inch in 3-shot groups. Now, you've already seen 2 range sessions during this video. I'm going to edit the daylights out of this thing. It's going to look like somebody's sitting there with an AR and they just happen to have ammunition they got to get rid of. So I'll see you back here in about a minute. I'll see you at the...
All right, ladder test, 77s. Seating the longest at 0.9. We're going to take these into the top left corner.
Yeah, they...
Back from the range, I have a target. I got data. All right. So it's been a little froggy. Wanted to try something a little different. I don't know. It's a little harder to see, I think. The brown with the black holes kind of vented out a little bit. Probably won't do that again. Nonetheless, it got the data that we wanted to have, and it got it all on one target. So that was pretty cool. What'd that data look like? My biggest group was just over 1 MOA, 1.092. My best, 0.254. Actually not quite as good as that N135, but nonetheless, they're just 3-shot groups, and we're really looking for a pattern here. So if I take that and I put it into the graph, I put that up behind me, did we have a pattern? And the answer is, yes, we did. Let's take a look at groups 4 and 5. There is the pattern we are looking for. Remember, I loaded these longest to shortest, so 4 is longer than 5. I'm going to come back 1/1000th of an inch from group 4. In this case, that's going to put me at 2.080. 2.080. N135 gave me 2.083. Awfully similar. Anyway, do I have a worse group? Worst group's clearly going to be 2090. So I'm going to load my 25 shots of 2.080 as my tuned load, and I'm going to take that and compare it to 2.090 as my worst load. Or my longer will be my worst, my shorter will be my tuned load this time. We're going to do the exact same game, load up 50 rounds. I'll finish the entire loading process except for seating the projectile, and I'll seat 25 at my longer, 25 at my shorter. I'm going to take my 25 and 25, take them to the range, and do some round robin shooting. I'll see you at the range.
All right, we've got 2080. Spots 1 through 5 going into the bottom left meatball.
Right. Yeah, I might be calling them. It should be.
2.090. Block 1 through 5. Going to the bottom right default.
All right, shooters.
Back from the range, I got targets, I got data, all right. Quick reminder on this. This side is my quote short side, which are the ones that I expected to be able to tune. These are the ones that were longer that I expected to be the worst. So how'd we do? On the long side, my worst group, 0.751. My best group, 389. Not too shabby. On the short side, 0.720, so a little bit smaller on the largest group, but 0.480 as our smallest, which is a little bit bigger. Interesting. Let's see how this plays out. All right, let's take a look at the composite of all this. Here's the long 25 shot group. These are the supposedly worst. Let's see how they looked. We can see we got a 0.871 MOA. Not too shabby. A little bit bigger than that 3/4 that we were looking for. A little bit bigger than the N135's best result, but still really not bad. Mean radius was 0.272, so that is getting up there a little bit. That tells us that the group was pretty evenly distributed through that large group. There weren't a whole lot of outliers that were dragging it out. They were all just not as dense as we would like them to be. How about the ones we expected to tune? 0.722, so we did do a little bit better. In fact, we did well enough to get under our 3/4 requirement. What was that mean radius? 2.12. Now we're getting respectable. This looks pretty good. How'd that velocity turn out? The longs ran an SD very similar to the worst of N135, 10.6. Still under the 12 we require. How about the shorts? That came up a bit, 9.2. Still well within where we want to be. This one is also looking very, very nice. This is going to be a confirmed load with our seating depth. It will move forward. So I have 2 successful loads out of all this process that produce 2 that are shooting very similar and are what we're looking for. Well, how similar are they? Let's take a look at, just put the stats together with N135 and N140. That's what I'm going to call them. And let's see the difference between them. Yeah, not much in any category. 0.712 versus 0.722, 0.192 versus 0.212, SD of 10.7 versus 9.2. Yeah, it's a little better. Probably wash out as we continue to shoot these. They'll probably be very, very similar or the same. Velocity 2762 versus 2774. So once again, probably the same or too close to even call. What does this tell me? Are these loads interchangeable? They very well may be. We're going to take them to 600 yards, both of them, to find out. Now, I promised we'd talk about, did this matter? Well, I just showed you all the numbers. Yeah, of course it mattered. But did it? All right, so if we start looking at the statistics of all of this, it's a little tighter than it first appears. So let's talk about that for a minute. What were the differences between the best and the worst of N135? 0.211 MOA, a little less than a 1/4 inch. How about N140? 0.149. So even a smaller difference. If I take those mean radiuses and I plug them in with the actual speeds so I can get the ES involved in this math calculation as well, what I'll find is I do not have 95% confidence that these loads, if I shoot 1,000 of each, won't end up being exactly the same. If I don't have 95%, what do I have? I have 83% on N135. I have 86% on N140. Is that sure? No, and we can never be sure with statistics. We want the highest probability we can get. To say something is, quote, statistically significant, we need that 95%. So we don't have a definitive scientifically, statistically answer that it did in fact make a difference. What does that mean to me? Well, as I've said, I need more data points pointing to the answer than just that data. That's strong evidence that it made a difference, but it's not definitive. There's still room for that to be wrong. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for multiple things to tell me that's right. And I'll tell you why I go through all this knowing that's going to be my result. Because I've done this quite a bit, and what I see are two things that happen. Either the projectile doesn't respond to what I expect on my seating depth test. I don't get that wave. I don't get a small groups and then a large and then small and then large. I don't see that. What I get is just kind of random distribution of all of that. If that happens, I know that that particular projectile is not going to respond to seating depth, and when I'm done, I won't see much of a difference, if any. However, if I do that test and I do see this action that I just saw with these both, then I know that I can tune it somewhat and it will have a response. And when it responds, always it's responding with the quote tuned one being smaller than the other. That's about as definitive as I can give you. Now, there is an argument about which ones are tunable and which ones aren't. If you ask AI or jump on the forums and ask anybody who's read AI, they're going to tell you there's a difference between secant and tangent when it comes to seating depth and whether they'll respond or not. In my experience, that really doesn't have that big of an impact. It just doesn't. High BC bullets are said by the internet to be more sensitive to seating depth. I have found that that's just not necessarily the case. So now the question is, should you waste your ammunition and time and effort to do a seating depth test? I'll tell you my thoughts on it. A 1/4 inch is the most you're going to get out of seating depth. If a 1/4 inch difference in your group size matters to you, and some people spend thousands to try to achieve that in other ways, try seating depth. If a 1/4 inch makes no difference to what you're doing, don't waste your time. Another reason I may not do seating depth, this cost me 100 rounds per cartridge to do the seating depth. I got to run the test and I got to run the confirmation. If I've got a barrel that has a very short life, if I've got 1,000 rounds I'm going to get out of this barrel, I'm probably not going to spend 1/10 of it trying to find seating depth. Just not going to bother with it. Right? That's one of the reasons I'm doing all my testing that you've seen on this channel so far with 223 and 308, because their barrels are extremely forgiving, and I'm going to run them into the thousands of rounds without any degradation in velocity. So your experience will vary there. And I'm just giving you the information that I have so you can make that evaluation for yourself. So wrapping all this up, those of you that have been following the 223 load development, what's next? Then what's next is I'm going to load another 50 rounds, 25 of N135, 25 of N140. We're going to the 600. I'll see you there. For those of you that haven't really followed along here and you're just curious, what's this guy doing? The next content I am going to be developing after this, I might be doing a little work with some tuners. Stay tuned for that. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you're interested in a little work on the tuners, be sure that you do. This is Old Man Taylor. Thank you for your time.